Hey there! Welcome to episode 2 of my web series on innovation neighborhoods and the like. I just returned from Dubai in the United Arab Emirates, where I gave a keynote speech on innovation, specifically about innovation neighborhoods. And that's a lot of what we're seeing in the slides that I'm presenting in these first few episodes on this web series. Happy to keep talking about what we started in the first episode. Today we'll focus on how it is that maker spaces can afford to exist, frankly, and a few pictures about the trip to Dubai. I might make a separate web video just about that because it was so eye-opening and so interesting. So here's the second installment. Thanks for watching. So like I mentioned, I was grateful to be the keynote speaker at an innovation conference in Dubai last week. I'll show a few pictures from that experience, really remarkable. And then we'll dive into the confluence of forces that have come together in the last few years that make it possible to make a makerspace. In the previous web series or web episode, we talked about the definition of innovation, who is an innovator, and how technology can improve our lives. Now we'll talk about how that's actually done in a makerspace. But first, here is a picture of some of the folks who attended this government conference on grassroots innovation. They called this an innovation neighborhood, and I was flattered to see that they had actually attempted to model it after the neighborhood of Franklinton, where the Idea Foundry is located. So they have kind of a street going around the whole neighborhood. They've got some parks and picnic tables for places to hang out. And then they also have vendors selling everything from solar panels to 3D printers. And the vendors' tables are actually made out of reclaimed pallets and reclaimed wood. So really touching how they strove to replicate these details. It was also inspiring to see the posters that they had papered the walls with that really do embrace innovation and the need to not fear failure, things that might be a little bit novel in a culture that's as conservative as the Arab culture. My father is Arabic. I grew up in this kind of household, and it's really refreshing to see how aggressively the government and the people are embracing innovation. And it's always, like I said, fun to see the common language from Maker Faire to Maker Faire all around the world, or maker spaces, where they all speak in 3D printing and Arduino and Raspberry Pi and Locksport, and a culture of empowered innovation. Really remarkable things. And of course, the local culture is also reflected in the products that they're making. They also had a business pitch competition where they had 3 teams present technology solutions to social challenges like delivering enough water or enough power to the people of the United Arab Emirates. And the judging panel consisted of one of the presidents of the university, representative from industry, and representative from startups. And this was very much like any business pitch you might see in the States. What was a big surprise to me was the bagpipe band that preceded the whole event. Got a close-up of some of those folks here. That was a great surprise, and the music really resonated through the building. And then again, I was glad to present a few of my ideas on grassroots innovation and maker culture and innovation neighborhoods. So in this little web episode, we're going to talk a bit about how when I went to college, I was really interested in ushering in that era of technology where flying cars existed, jetpacks existed, maybe even elevators into space. So I studied everything from electrical to mechanical to civil engineering until I really came across material science and metallurgy when I realized that you can design nearly anything. You can design an elevator into space, or you can design an airplane with a mile-wide wingspan, but you can't build everything because not all of the materials today can support all the demands we might put on them. In effect, stuff breaks. So I thought if I could invent a new material, a new alloy, maybe a more conductive copper, someone can make a faster computer. If you can make a stronger steel or carbon fiber, maybe someone can build that elevator into space. And I thought that would be like adding another color to the palette that all the other engineers, designers, and scientists are painting with. So tried to do that for a bunch of years, worked in industry, in process engineering, metallurgy, and more. Companies from Apple to MIT to Airbus and Boeing. And while I studied computational metallurgy and did that in industry, my sister became an artistic metalsmith and a jeweler and a professor of sculpture up in Vermont. And one faithful year, she asked me to give a lecture to her students on the science of heat and beat. You know, what happens to steel when you heat it up and forge it, or silver when you heat it up and smith it. And I had a new PhD and a pretty big ego, and I thought, that'd be fun. I'll go to her art space and teach her artists how to be practical, add a little technology to their creativity. Where I was deeply embarrassed was that within just 5 minutes of the Q&A, I realized I couldn't teach them anything useful. That was embarrassment number one. And number two was that they were all better welders and machinists and blacksmiths than I. They were all better makers. So if I had an idea, maybe I could write a computer program about it or design an alloy or process. If they had an idea, they just made the damn thing. And so that made me very envious. Within just a couple of hours, they could realize something they were thinking of. And I desperately wanted to be able to do that as well. I was also really, really envious of the work and life environment that my sister lived in. She taught at the Vermont Studio Center for many years, and this was an old lumber mill that had 30 bedrooms built into it, and every month 30 artists from around the world would come to visit, and during the day they would learn tips and tricks, they'd share ideas. If they were a fine artist, they might learn photography. If they were a photographer, they might learn to paint. If they're a painter, they might learn to write. And then they'd go home having informed their medium with a month of training in something else. And I think that's where innovation comes from. When you're learning from people who see the world differently than you, who know things differently, who can tell you what you don't know, you don't know. And then in the evenings, everyone would gather around the campfire and they'd have dinner and drinks and conversation and a lot of fun. It was the most dynamic environment I'd ever been in, and I really wanted to create something like that that also had a technology component, a component where you can make practical products. But I didn't have the time or money to go back to college to learn 3D design or 3D printing. That was what was coming on the stage about 10 years ago. And that was a big stumbling block until I realized that YouTube is pretty much the world's university now. You can learn nearly anything from art history to artificial intelligence legally for free, as long as you've got a laptop, electricity, and access to the web. So in essence, it's possible now to create a college with no professors, or to create a school where the answer to every question is Google it. And I think that's really the heart of why a makerspace can exist, because information is out there. If the presumption is that all of what you need to learn is available legally, then teach yourself, and then use resources in a clubhouse like a makerspace to make your ideas happen. So the game changer of the last few years is that information is free. It sounds strange to say that, but I think it's true. And of course, we know that you need more than knowledge to create something. You need a design, you need a plan, you need a blueprint. Well, that used to mean you'd have to pay expensive licensing fees to use expensive CAD software. You had to be a pretty talented draftsperson. But now design tools are also free, legally free. And they're great. These are a couple of videos from a software program called Sculptris. This is a free program that allows you to essentially virtually sculpt. So wherever you drag the mouse, it moves material, compresses, stretches, carves. You can zoom in and do fine detailed work, or zoom out and do broad brush work. And then when you're done, you can export this digital file and 3D print it, or laser cut it, or CNC machine it. There are also some really great virtual sculpting apps. This is one called Medium, with the VR system called Oculus Rift. So this guy is taking an idea, clearly he's got in his head, and very quickly creating a 3D digital file of it, very organically, very intuitively. And of course, you can also do product design with things like this too. So here, I love that this person is using virtual reality to improve virtual reality, creating a new type of headset. So I think we see this virtuous cycle of increasing iteration to optimum design by empowering people to improve things they use every day. And then we all know that once you have those digital files, there are machines now that can carve them out of metal, CNC machines, for example, 3D print them out of plastic. There are lasers that can cut wood, plastic, even metal. So making things is much easier now. So I think what you do with this information is that you take people, you start with a community of folks who are talented, curious, creative, passionate, innovative, and you connect them to the web and you teach them how to teach themselves. You point the way to all the instructional videos, to the free software programs, from electronic circuit design to 3D digital design and more. And then you emphasize how important it is to create mobile applications, websites, computer programs, to do IoT, Bluetooth programming, for example. But you also emphasize how important it is to realize 3D prototypes, practical, functional devices that allow someone to kick the tires, to say, hey, is this something that someone would buy or use? And then put all of this under one roof. And that's what we call a makerspace. And I think the heart of any makerspace is that culture of personal empowerment, that we can be better tomorrow than we are today, and that our innovations don't just help us, but they can potentially help other people around the world. In the next web series, we'll talk about our makerspace, the Columbus Idea Foundry, pictured right here in good old Columbus, Ohio. And I look forward to talking about that. So thanks again for listening.